Snow drifted like salt over the rooftops of Seattle, the wind howling through narrow alleys where windows fogged with warmth from within. Maya Thompson pulled her scarf tighter around her neck, breath puffing out in pale clouds. "Why tonight, of all nights?" she muttered. She wasn't the type to go out late, much less hand-deliver books. But tonight's client was different. Julian Hart, a best-selling novelist returning from years of literary silence. He had requested a bulk order of rare books for a private signing and insisted they be delivered to his guest house perched on the hill above Lake Union. Maya knocked, fingers numb even inside her gloves. The door opened and there he was, the shadowy figure from her imagination, sharp features dulled by fatigue, stubble dusting his jaw, and unreadable eyes. "You're late," he said flatly. "I got stuck in traffic, surprise snowstorm," Maya replied, her tone anything but apologetic. "And you clearly aren't used to thanking people who deliver books in weather straight out of a frozen nightmare." Julian tilted his head, as if assessing her. Then, wordlessly, he stepped aside. Inside was warmer than she expected. Golden lamplight glowed softly. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the scent of pine wood lingered in the air. Maya set the box of books on the table, her eyes caught by a wall lined with scribbled notes, crossed-out drafts, and an old typewriter. "This place," she murmured, "feels like every corner holds an unfinished story." Julian didn't move. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe it's where you bury the ones you couldn't finish." Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, two strangers were about to begin a chapter neither of them expected to write. Julian poured himself a glass of red wine and raised the bottle toward Maya in silent offering. She hesitated for a beat, then nodded. "As long as you're not the type to slip something into a stranger's drink," she said, half joking. "No silver spoons, no secrets," Julian replied. "Just a writer trying to hold on to something in the middle of a storm." They sat by the fire. The snow beat against the windows in distant, steady rhythm. Maya glanced around before asking softly, "Why did you disappear? The literary world thought you'd given up for good." Julian didn't answer right away. He swirled the wine in his glass. "Once, writing kept me alive, but then the person I wrote for wasn't there anymore." He looked up. "And you, working in a bookstore? But you talk about novels like you've built worlds of your own." Maya gave a wistful smile. "I used to write romance stories, but I hated how the women always fell for men with cold eyes and perfect faces." Julian chuckled, a deep, surprised sound. "So, I'm the villain in the kind of book you tear up." "Exactly." Maya took a sip of wine. "But if you were a character, I think you'd be the type who never lets anyone in but quietly keeps everything they leave behind." That made Julian pause. For a moment, the guarded look in his eyes gave way to something tired and honest. Maya turned her gaze to the fire. "Funny," she murmured. "Some people, we only meet once, but it feels like they already know a piece of us." Julian's voice dropped low, maybe because it's the part they've been hiding too. The wine was nearly gone, the fire still flickered, and between them stretched a silence that wasn't awkward. It was like the breath before a melody changes key. Subtle, quiet, unforgettable. The night passed in the rhythm of wind and flickering firelight. Maybe it was the wine, maybe it was the warmth of a strange room, or maybe it was the way they said things to each other that they'd never said to anyone else. But somehow the space between them had vanished. Maya swirled the last sip of wine in her glass, her eyes catching the glow of the flames. "If this were a short story," she said, "the heroine would probably do something stupid, like believe you're not the kind of man who hurts people." Julian tilted his head. "And if you were the writer of that story?" "I'd give her a kiss," Maya said, setting the glass down. "Not because she trusts him, but so she remembers she still feels something." She stood and walked toward him. Firelight danced in her hair, her eyes bright with hesitation. "Don't do this," Julian said softly. "Not if you're going to disappear by morning." "No one makes promises during a snowstorm," Maya whispered. "But sometimes a chapter worth remembering is still worth writing." Then she kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was fierce, like they were trying to say everything they didn't know how to say. The heat between them burned away the cold they'd both carried for far too long. His hands found her. Hers held him like he was both dangerous and necessary. In that moment, the past didn't matter. The future didn't exist. There was only now. And the man who used to be just a name on a book cover, now the warmth pressed against her lips. And as they fell together onto the soft rug beneath them, Maya knew. Tomorrow, she'd regret this. But tonight, for just one chapter, it would be one she'd never forget. The next morning, morning light slipped through the thin curtains, casting soft rays across the room cluttered with books, blankets, and a lingering warmth that hadn't yet faded. Maya woke slowly, her head aching from the wine, but her chest aching from something else. Something unnamed but heavy in the air. This wasn't her bed. Not her tiny apartment with the chipped wall and the sound of traffic outside. She lay wrapped in wool blankets in silence, inside Julian Hart's warm guest house. She sat up, heart pounding as memories of the night before returned. His kiss, his hands, the look in his eyes, and the moment she let herself believe in something fragile. "What chapter did I just write into my life?" she whispered. Julian was gone. The other side of the bed lay empty, faintly warm, carrying the trace of cedarwood cologne. She figured he was somewhere in the house, maybe in his writing room or out on the balcony with coffee and falling snow. Maya got up, quickly pulling on her clothes, a blue sweater, jeans, boots tossed near the fireplace like a quiet inside joke. At the kitchen counter, she found her notebook, tore out a page, and scribbled a few lines. "Just this. Thanks for the storm, not the staying kind. Take care." No name, no number, no promises. She stepped into the elevator, pressed the button, and turned away without a glance back. The doors closed behind her like the final period of a sentence. Not painful, but empty. Back in the kitchen, Julian returned from his morning run. He spotted the note, picked it up, and read it without a word. A crooked smile pulled at his lips, but his eyes didn't follow. He was gone. And she had left behind a chapter with no title. 3 weeks later, Maya sat on the closed lid of the toilet in the tiny bathroom of her rented apartment in Vermont. In her hands was a pregnancy test. She had been staring at it for 3 full minutes, willing the result to change. But it didn't. 2 bold blue lines, undeniable, unapologetic. Time stilled around her. The ticking of the wall clock felt distant, the dripping faucet echoed like something from another world. She swallowed hard, trying to keep down the wave rising in her throat. Then she whispered into the silence, "How could this happen to me?" But she knew. That night, the snow, the firelight, the moment she let herself believe, just once, that her heart could be trusted not to betray her. That night hadn't ended when the storm cleared. Maya set the test beside the sink and buried her face in her hands. A memory surfaced, uninvited. Her mother's tired eyes, her quiet voice over a cup of cold tea. "He left me when he found out." Men like that don't stay, Maya. They show up only to disappear. She had been 14, and from that moment, she had made herself a vow. Never again. Never fall. Never give someone else the pen to her story. But now her body was writing a chapter her heart wasn't ready to read. She rose and looked at herself in the mirror. Pale face, puffy eyes, and a silence she had never known before. She was no longer the girl sorting paperbacks in the Seattle bookstore. Not the woman who walked away from one snow-drenched night, pretending to leave it behind. She was someone about to become a mother, alone. The decision came not like thunder, but like a long, weary sigh. She wouldn't tell Julian. No messages, no calls. She wouldn't let her child grow up knowing a father who only existed on back covers and behind charming camera flashes. 2 weeks later, Maya sat by the window of a Greyhound bus heading away from Seattle. Rain streaked the glass. In her hands, a one-way ticket. In her suitcase, unfinished manuscripts. And in her belly, a small life growing. quiet but undeniable. She didn't know how she'd survive, didn't know how she'd be a mother, but she knew one thing. She would keep writing her story, even with trembling hands, even if she had to write it alone. Maya had quit teaching and taken a part-time job at the local library, a quiet position that let her stay out of sight and out of conversation. She spent her mornings shelving books and helping kids find picture stories, and her nights writing one word at a time, like tapping a rhythm into the heartbeat growing inside her. She had done well pretending everything was okay. Until that afternoon. The annual Vermont Book Fair was bustling with authors, publishers, and local book lovers. Maya was assigned to help at the children's book booth. She wore a loose cream sweater, her belly, now 6 months along, partially hidden beneath a thick scarf. Everything was normal until she heard it. Please welcome author Julian Hart. Her whole body froze. 1 beat. 2, then he appeared. Julian stepped onto the small stage, taller than she remembered, his face tanned and tired, his posture softer. He wasn't the distant man from that snowy night. His eyes scanned the crowd as though searching for something, then stopped. On her. Maya turned away, pretending to organize books. But his footsteps came closer. When she looked up, he was already standing in front of her. "Maya," Julian said, his voice low and careful, like speaking too loudly might make her vanish. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Hi, Julian," she smiled politely. "The book world is small, I guess." His gaze dropped to her belly. "How long?" 6 months. Her voice steady, her fingers tight around the book she held. Julian paused. She saw it in his eyes, the mental math, the realization. Then came the question, quiet and raw. "It's mine, isn't it?" The words cut between them like a blade across still water. Maya looked at him. She remembered that snowy night, his voice by the fire, his arms around her, the kiss that felt like a door opening. And then she said, "No, it's not yours." Julian didn't flinch. He just stood there, blinking slowly, as if his hope had just been erased. He nodded once. "I just needed to be sure." "You're sure now," she replied. "Everything's fine." "I'm fine." He hesitated. "If you need anything at all." "I don't need anything, Julian." Her voice was soft but final. "I just want peace." He nodded again, but peace wasn't in his eyes, only the ache of unsaid things. He looked at her for a long moment, memorizing her, then turned and walked away into the crowd. Maya stayed still. Her hand rested on her belly as the baby kicked softly, as if sensing the weight of the moment. She didn't cry, but inside, something cracked quietly. She had lied, not out of anger, but fear. Fear that if he stayed, she might believe him. And if she believed him, she might lose everything. Julian left the book fair, but his mind didn't leave Maya. Her words, "Dilio esti chutali," "it's not yours," echoed in his head like a song stuck off beat. Short, clear, but not convincing. He wasn't someone who trusted easily, not after that night, not after the look she gave him, guarded, hesitant, and somewhere underneath, afraid. That evening, back in his hotel room, Julian sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. After a few moments of silence, he dialed the one person he could trust, Dr. Evan Blake, his oldest friend and an OBGYN who knew too well the ghosts Julian carried. "Evan," he said quietly, "I need you to do something for me, and it has to stay between us." "Tell me this isn't another woman mess," Evan replied, half joking, half worried. "It's not a mess," Julian answered. "It's someone I can't stop thinking about, and maybe a baby." There was a pause. Then Evan's voice softened. "What do you need?" Julian texted Maya's name, birthday, and an estimated conception window. Just enough. A few hours later, Evan called back. "Julian, the due date lines up almost exactly with the night you told me about. There's no real doubt here." Julian didn't respond at first. He just stared out the hotel window, watching snowflakes beginning to fall on the rooftops below. Even though Maya had denied it, his heart already knew the truth. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the urge to run. He just wanted to stay. Julian sat alone in a small hotel room, golden lamplight casting quiet shadows across an old wooden desk. Outside, snow drifted down like silent sighs. He'd been in Vermont for 3 days, since seeing Maya again. He should have left. That's what he always did. Leave when things got too real. But this time, he couldn't. There was something in her eyes, the way she denied him so gently, the way her hand rested protectively on her belly as he walked away, that made it impossible to forget. She had said no, but his heart didn't believe her. Not out of arrogance, but because he'd known love before. And no one looks at someone the way Maya had looked at him if everything inside is truly gone. Julian had never pictured himself as a father. His fictional men were loners, complicated, emotionally evasive, like him, or rather, the version of him he used to be. Until that moment, he stood in front of Maya and saw, maybe for the first time, a version of his future that didn't feel empty. No more cold apartments. No more wandering to escape what he couldn't name. He didn't know how to love a child, but he knew he wanted to learn. He didn't want to miss this. Not like his father had. Julian gave a bitter laugh, dry and low. For years, he'd been running from the man he resented most, yet somehow, in that running, he had become more like him than he'd ever realized. No, that would stop here. He reached for a blank sheet of paper. Not an email, not a message, a handwritten letter. Like somehow, putting real ink to paper could help him reach the realest part of himself. Maya, you probably don't want anything from me, not after the way we last spoke. And I don't blame you for lying, honestly, I understand. When people are afraid, they choose the safest path. You did, and for the first time in my life, I didn't run. I don't know what kind of father I'd be, but I know who I won't be. I won't be the man who walked away from my mother when I was 8. I will stay. Even if you never call, even if you don't believe me, I will stay. Because maybe, if you let me, we don't need to rewrite everything. We can just keep writing. Enclosed is the first draft of a short story, The Man Who Stayed. It's not perfect, but it's the truest thing I've ever written. If you read it and still don't want to see me, I'll understand. But if even a part of you still hopes, write to me. Just one line. Julian. He folded the letter, tucked in the 16-page manuscript, stamped the envelope, and wrote the library's address, where he knew Maya worked part-time. He stepped out into the sharp winter wind, the kind that cut the skin but cleared the heart. For once, he wasn't leaving. Not because he was lost, but because he finally knew what he wanted. Not another sad love story, but a new chapter, if she was willing to turn the page. Julian mailed the letter on a late afternoon, just as the snow gave way to a soft, steady rain. He didn't know if Maya would read it, or if she'd ever write back, but he had done the only thing he could. He stayed. As for Maya, she had no idea that, as she entered her final month of pregnancy, the letter had quietly begun its journey to her hands, just as her world was about to change forever. A rainy night, starting in the afternoon and lasting until late at night, not the soft, misty kind Vermont was used to, but a heavy, urgent downpour, as if the sky itself had begun to panic. Maya woke to a sharp, searing pain cutting through her belly. At first, she thought she'd just shifted wrong in her sleep, but when the second wave hit, stronger, more rhythmic, she knew. It was time, 2 weeks early, in the middle of the night, in the middle of a storm. She called out to her aunt, trembling, her breath coming in short, frightened gasps. In the old car skidding toward the hospital, Maya held on to the armrest, tears falling, not from fear of birth, but from the one name echoing in her mind. Julian. She didn't want to call him, but in that threshold moment between pain and life, something inside her whispered, not everything was over. Her aunt made the call Maya couldn't. She called him. Across the country, Julian was mid-sentence in a story draft when the phone rang. He listened. He asked nothing, no blame, no hesitation. Just 3 words. I'm on my way. 3 hours later, he arrived, rain-soaked, breathless, heart-pounding. He wasn't allowed in the delivery room at first, so he waited, outside the closed doors, under the dim red light, every minute louder than the last. Every cry from inside pulled at something deep in him. And then he heard it. Julian. Her voice. Weak, but clear. No one else could say his name like that. The nurse looked at him, nodded. She wants you in there. Inside, Maya was struggling, breath ragged. Their eyes met, and everything she'd built to keep him out crumbled in an instant. She didn't speak, just reached for his hand, and he took it. They held on through it all, no promises, no plans, just warmth. Just the kind of trust that only comes in moments when everything else falls away. At 3:14 a.m., a baby girl entered the world, red and crying under the rain-soaked roof of a quiet Vermont hospital. Her name was Ellie Hope, because sometimes the most beautiful things arrive when you aren't ready. And hope begins the moment you reach for the most uncertain hand and choose to hold on. Julian looked at her, his heart breaking open in ways he never knew possible. He leaned down and kissed Maya's forehead, not as a lover, but as someone overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not turning me away this time." Maya smiled, exhausted, glowing. "Thank you for staying." A year later, Vermont entered spring with clear skies, lush green grass, and birds chirping on the porch. In the small white house by the woods, Julian was busy in the kitchen, his clumsy appearance making Maya laugh. He was trying to make an omelet according to her recipe, but the second egg broke before it hit the pan. Ellie sat in the dining chair, her hands clapping the table happily, her neck stretched out as if cheering. Maya stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes filled with tenderness. None of them had ever thought that their family would start with a snowy night and a lie. But now every simple moment like that had become a piece of a life they had never dared to dream of. Julian learned to be a father from scratch, and with all his patience. He had flustered until his face turned red when changing his first diaper, holding it the wrong way and peeing all over his shirt. He learned how to hold the baby so that its head wouldn't tilt, how to cook porridge without lumps, how to sing lullabies even though his voice was never in tune. At night, he read stories to Ellie in a deep voice, often adding a few humorous lines that made Maya laugh from the next room. He was also responsible for rocking the baby to sleep when she had trouble sleeping, holding her in his sling, humming the story of the man who wouldn't leave. He wasn't perfect, but he was there, and that was more important than any skill. Maya, on the other hand, became calm, determined. After months of writing only short paragraphs, for the first time she allowed herself to start something long. Her first novel. She wrote in the afternoons when Ellie was sleeping, in the early mornings before the rest of the family woke up. The story was about a single woman who was pregnant in the middle of winter and a man who left, then returned, not with a promise, but with a letter. Julian read the first draft one rainy evening. When he turned the last page, his eyes were red. He said nothing, just pulled Maya into his arms. "This story is beautiful," he whispered, "and true." She smiled. "I couldn't have written it without you, if you hadn't stayed." Their life was simple: coffee in the morning, sunbathing at noon, cooking together in the afternoon, Julian still dropping eggs, Maya trying not to laugh so as not to ruin his chef seriousness. They had tiring days, nights when the baby cried, arguments over trivial things, but instead of turning away, they sat down. They talked. They apologized. One afternoon in May, Maya was watering the plants when she heard Ellie laughing. She looked up at the garden. Julian was carrying the baby on his shoulders, running around, breathing and laughing as if he were the older child. "Again, Dad. Fly again." "Daddy's gone, baby girl." Maya stood there, her hand on her chest, where her heart was aching not from pain, but from gratitude. Gratitude for having the courage to believe again. That night, after putting Ellie to bed, the two of them sat on the porch, holding hands. "Do you feel like a dad?" Julian asked, half joking. Maya looked at him, her eyes sparkling in the yellow light. "No, you don't. You're a real dad." Julian smiled, needing no further explanation. Because sometimes the most magical thing isn't where we go, but how we choose to stay, day after day, in awkwardness, in wordless love, in an imperfect life, but truly happy. Their lives continued with their warm, mundane routines, morning coffee, girls' laughter, and quiet evenings sitting side by side without speaking. One night in early summer, when Ellie was fast asleep and the only sound was the buzzing of insects on the porch, Maya was typing the final lines of her first novel manuscript. Julian stepped behind her, holding a small, simple brown box. "Can I interrupt a chapter?" he asked, his voice as soft as a breath. Maya turned around, and before she could answer, he was on one knee, no frills, no rehearsal. Just the familiar, gentle gaze, and a simple ring with her name engraved inside. Julian looked up and said softly, "You're the story I want to write every single day." Maya fell silent, not out of surprise, but because her heart was both full and trembling. She didn't need a bright evening, just this moment. The right person, the right reason. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes, her voice trembling but firm. "Yes." Julian smiled, put the ring on her finger, then pulled her into his arms. They stood silently in each other's arms in the quiet of the night, where nothing proved love except staying. Maya returned to the table, writing the last line of the novel. The heroine didn't fall in love because he was perfect. She did because he chose to stay.